Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to me, your host, Christian Watson. My friends, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, the president of Ukraine, has been quite the media darling recently, has he not? He has been on a virtual tour of various parliaments of many countries, some European powers such as Britain and Germany, and other North American powers such as Canada, and most recently the United States. And he has been passionately making his case as to why all the countries of the world should go ahead and help Ukraine. Now, my friends, the Ukrainians are going through something that is quite harrowing. They are having to not only fight off a ravening madman who is trying to gobble up their country and absorb it into his historical idea of what he thinks should be, that is the restoration of the Russian Federation or the Russian Soviet Union back to what he wants it to be, and also for the advancement of his own power, of course. And not only that, but they're also dealing with their young dying prematurely. They're dealing with maternity hospitals being bombed. They're dealing with a lot of things that are just harrowing. And Zelensky knows this. And I do believe that Zelensky wants to address this. But the way Zelensky is addressing this, and the way others are addressing Zelensky, is particularly perverse. And I shall explain why. My friends, Zelensky has been held recently as a folk hero, as a sort of heroic figure, sort of a hero without a cape. You know, you have The View talking about him as a hero. You have glittering headlines across the major publications of Western media saying he's a hero. How did Zelensky become a hero? How is his heroism being used to fight to protect Ukraine? And almost always, whenever anyone criticizes Zelensky, they're accused of being either anti-Semitic or just against the Ukrainians, and thus for the efforts of Vladimir Putin. Well, as I mentioned before, I'm not for the efforts of Vladimir Putin. It is an absolute tragedy that in an age where we have the most information that we've had in the history of mankind, and therefore the most ability to perfect our rational faculties, to perfect our interaction with knowledge, to learn how to debate, to learn how to understand and grasp knowledge, that we are still defaulting to these sort of limp-brained arguments that are entirely guilt by association, are entirely ad hominem, and have nothing to do with the actual claim I make. Just because I oppose something that Zelensky might do, or I am skeptical of a certain party that may be in favor of Ukraine, does not mean I support the destruction of an entire people. Does not mean I support Russia. But, of course, this is the landscape we live in terms of how discussion happens. But anyway, Zelensky is held as a sort of hero. He is romanticized. And my friends, this video really is not about Zelensky. This video is about the problem of hero worship. Because Zelensky is the subject of this video. But the same critiques that I have of Zelensky would be the same critique I have of anyone else who is being romanticized in the public eye as some sort of demigod of truth and justice by the media, by a lot of folks in the media, and who's sort of this avatar for a greater cause. The reason I oppose this kind of handling of a politician, or of anyone really, is that it ignores the inherent flaws that man has. Everyone has flaws, my friends. Everyone has deep flaws. And the fact that we have these flaws is not necessarily even a bad thing. It shows that we can achieve greatness in the face of limitation. Because if we are limited and we are challenged by certain things, overcoming those things is a testament to our resilience. Now, my friends, but when you romanticize someone and you make them into a hero, you basically make them unimpeachable. And you make anyone who wants to engage with that person walk in the terms of why they're a hero. So in the case of Zelensky, since he is this hero figure, if you criticize Zelensky, you are therefore criticizing the survival of the Ukrainian people. You are therefore criticizing democracy. You are therefore criticizing things that people would think would make you vile. Criticizing Zelensky is not simply criticizing Zelensky, it's criticizing someone's ability to live and prosper. And of course, that links you into a whole host of moral wrong. This is the issue with hero worship. Hero worship does not allow us to truly reckon with the merits of a certain person. It simply takes one aspect of a certain person, blows it up on the broader scale, and presents that as the entirety of a certain person. So my friends, hero worship is thus reductive. It reduces everything about me, all the parts that make me me, and it puts me in this image, this cultivated, manicured, superficial, artificial image which can be used in this instance for a political purpose, or can be used as a sort of all-purpose argument for whatever cause I want to further. Whether this be with Martin Luther King, who people use in almost every single respect on both the left and the right, whether this be with John Lennon, who a lot of people on the left like to use, even though John Lennon was an abuser and he was not very nice to his wife. Regardless, hero worship glorifies and magnifies the good, but doesn't put in front the bad. Now, Zelensky has some bad to him. Not just any old human vice that we have struggled with for many, many years. Not just an addiction or a sort of urge to be profane or sort of or urge to be ill-tempered. No. Zelensky has some flaws that penetrate on a deep moral level. And some of these flaws include his propensity to try to manipulate people into action through moral sanctimony. What do I mean? My friends, when Zelensky went to the German Bundestag, hope I'm saying that correctly, and he spoke before them, he said that politicians say never again, but it's happening again. An entire people was being exterminated. Now, my friends, never again is typically said in Germany to commemorate the Holocaust as a reminder of what they will not allow happen. And Zelensky is basically saying that a Holocaust is happening in Ukraine, and German politicians, by not enacting a no-fly zone, which is his main request, are basically an accomplice or they're a bystander to the Holocaust. Now, I don't like Holocaust comparisons whatsoever. They are absolutely disrespectful. The Holocaust is a special category of its own. But to go before a country in which that event took place and try to bully the politicians in that country with a sanctimonious attitude is nothing short of manipulative, and it is not becoming of someone who walks in honor and walks in virtue. It is rather becoming of someone who is willing to use whatever means he can to further his political aims, good or bad. Again, the ends don't justify the means. If the means are bad, the means compromise the ends. You cannot have moral ends that flow from morally compromised means. And if someone is trying to guilt trip me into something that I wasn't even a party to, the Holocaust, to further his political agenda, his means are fundamentally deceitful, and they are fundamentally disrespectful, and they are thus immoral. But let's keep going, man. It doesn't stop there. He goes to America, the Congress in America, the United States Congress, and he invokes 9/11 to drum support for his cause. 9/11, one of the worst events that happened on American soil. There are still families of 9/11 who are fighting and struggling to get compensation from the Sauds, from the people who had help with financing the terrorists, and he had the gall to go ahead and invoke 9/11 as being similar to his own crisis. It doesn't stop there. He went to the Canadian Parliament and said to the Canadians, what if it was your kids being bombed into oblivion? What if it was your kids who didn't have the ability to have peace at night? And he kept putting it closer to them. Kept using this sort of psychological tool to convince the Canadian Parliament that he was that his cause was very close to them, even though it's many, 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 many miles away. What is the point that I'm trying to make here? The point that I'm trying to make here is that Zelensky is tugging at the heartstrings in a way that is almost deeply insulting. Axios called it his shame on you tour, because that's exactly what's happening. Every time he goes to one of these places, whether it's the British Parliament, whether it's the Canadian Parliament, whether it's the U.S. Congress, whether it's the Bundestag, he is trying to appeal to historical events that have no similarity to what's happening in Ukraine to get support for what is happening in Ukraine. Wouldn't a prudent person, wouldn't a morally honest and virtuous person simply make his case, make it plainly, make it in light of truth, allow it to be subject to reason, and then move on? Why must he go to every country, pick out particular tragedies that happened in those countries, and then use them as a bullying tactics to beat the politicians in that close country into submission? Why must he do that? Why must he do that? Oh. Perhaps it's because he is skilled in putting on a show. Perhaps it's because, like most politicians, he's a rhetorician, not a logician or a philosopher. Perhaps it's because so many of us have our eyes attuned to what is happening in his country that we interpret and filter all of his words through the very real tragedy and human suffering that is happening in Ukraine. And that's the backdrop that Zelensky's operating off of. He is using the suffering in his country, minimizing the suffering of other people's countries, whether it be 9/11, whether it be the Holocaust, whether it be these imaginary scenarios where Canadian people were dying, whether it be in Britain. And then he's converting that into geopolitical fuel for his own ambitions. Look, if I was the president of a nation under siege, as Zelensky is, I would be doing everything I can to protect my nation. But I would not, and I promise you, I would not be going around wielding deceit and emotional wizardry to make my points. If my points are sound and just, they shall be made and they shall be heard. But if they are not sound nor just, shall they fall on deaf ears and go mute in the ears and minds of everyone who received them. That's how it should be. And if truth was operating in Zelensky's mind, that's how it would be. But no. He has to compare things to the Holocaust, 9/11, to things that have nothing to do with what's going on right now. And of course, he also said that if nations, he has said this in a tweet, do not put a no-fly zone over his country, they are an accomplice to terror. Now, two things, my friend. You understand that if you put a no-fly zone over Ukraine, as many have pointed out, war will break out. A gigantic war will break out, perhaps even nuclear annihilation, but he doesn't even care about that. He continues to make this same line. He's been saying this for weeks after weeks. He does not see, a good leader takes into calculation all of the factors before he makes a decision. And a leader whose country is on the brink of destruction right now, a prudent one, would choose his words wisely so he can bolster the morale of the people and his allies. He would not demean someone and then try to use that demeaning statement to extract favor from them. That's what an exploitative person does. That's what an abusive person does. They demean you and then say, okay, now that I've demeaned you, I made you feel bad. You want to fix it? Do what I say. No, that's not how human relationships operate. If human relationships operated that way, they would break down and they would collapse, they would unravel. But also, number two, there's also a very important moral point that I want to make, that natural law philosophers make all the time. Ethically, just because I abstain from something does not mean I am causing something. So if I were to walk by a car crash and I didn't help anyone in that car crash, if someone in that car crash, God forbid, happened to pass away or die or get paralyzed, and that could have been stopped if I would have helped them, I am not responsible for what happened to them because I did not put into effect the chain of events that led up to it. Because guess what? Anyone else could have helped them theoretically as well that was around. I am not responsible for things that happen that I had no role in creating. So if someone starves to death because I'm not giving them food, does that mean I killed them? Of course not. Because once again, they can go get food from anybody else. And the moral onus is not on me to give you something. My friends, as a moral agent, my duty is simply to adhere to my contracts, adhere to the unions I enter in, adhere to my agreements, but it's also to abstain from taking from you. Because the more I put my will on your will, the more I act upon you, the more I do things to you, is the less you have to do things. The more I try to interact with you in a way that is oppressive, is the less capacity you have to use your will in the manner that you desire, and that is liberty. That's the moral mandate. I have a duty to abstain from you, abstain from your stuff, and if I have a contract with you or an agreement with you, then I have the duty to fulfill it. But guess what? I don't have a contract with Ukraine. America has a contract with Ukraine, but it's a defense initiative, which, interestingly enough, it was never agreed to by, well, we'll leave that to the side. But we don't have a moral contract with Ukraine, so to speak. We don't have a contract with Ukraine that says if we don't help Ukraine in a certain way, putting a no-fly zone over their country, we are violating something. No, that's not the case. Human relationships are built off of mutual trust and action. They are not built off of guilt tripping. So once again, not only is Zelensky wrong strategically, A no-fly zone would be disastrous for Europe and the world and potentially endanger the future for our posterity. He's also wrong morally. Just because I don't do something does not mean I cause something that happened in my absence. With these two facts consistent, allow me to ask you, does anything I described to you in this video today model heroism? Because in my opinion, Zelensky is doing the opposite of heroism. He is using the horrors and terrors of the past, conjuring them up through wordplay, and then casting them like spells onto the parliaments of the earth to make his case, rather than standing on the truth of his convictions, standing on the truth of what's happening in Ukraine, and appealing in a way that is morally consistent and logically rigorous. To me, that sounds a lot like cowardice and nothing like heroism. Think on it, my friends. I love you guys so much. If you love me, patreon.com/officialcwatson or PayPal, which can be my email, officialcwatson@gmail.com, or you can get me on my Discord, which is in the comment section down below. Please like, share, subscribe this video. My friends, I love you guys so much, and please stay pensive.